Welcome to Mediographer Online, the show that helps you navigate the ever-changing video world. I'm Christopher Michael McHugh, joined as always by Phil Cappello. Our guest joining us from Melbourne, Australia is Nigel Abbott, Managing Director at Rippling Media. This episode we're talking about the future of online video. Now, Nigel, how is the online video world changing the way that you guys do pre-production?
It's aligned to the marketing or campaign objectives, that it has real purpose, and it has a call to action, so that we can then measure the success, go back to the brand or the marketing team and present those metrics. And of course, once they get their head around it, it then becomes an ongoing process, and they understand how important content is today.
On my side, where people have asked me producing things, I've often been asked to try to create a viral video, which I think is sort of a fool's errand. I think it's an ethereal enough concept that you're not going to be successful at that. I always tell people Coca-Cola and Saatchi have spent millions of dollars trying to create viral videos with moderate success, and the odds of me being able to do that are pretty minimal. But if it's not just clicks, then how do you, what are your metrics for success?
Well, I'll give you, and I love what you say about the viral video, because that's something that I always preach. There is no such thing as a viral video, certainly in a commercial sense, and I think that all those great commercial videos that are produced, there's been some paid put behind them, whether it's Old Spice or, whatever the great Heineken stuff, there's money put behind those, and that gets the thing snowballing. So, it's interesting that you say that, because, I'm in agreement. But, look, to give you an example, we do work with Kia Motor Company out of Korea. And the way we produce content for them, and then normally what they do is, they distribute it through their channels, and then they look at the engagement. They look at the duration. So, for instance, we produced a segment on their electric vehicle, and it's a 7-minute segment, and really you need that full 7 minutes to be able to clearly articulate and communicate all the key features and benefits of a car like that. So they look at, well, how long are people watching in this? And what sort of commentary and engagement and questions are we getting out of that? So the days of just sort of looking at how many views, that's an important component, but there are now these other very important components. And if you produce something terrific and let's say it's 5 minutes, but they're only watching 60 seconds and not getting past that, well, you've got a concern.
Now, that project that you're talking about right now, or others, what are you using to seal the deal, conversions, that type of thing? A little bit of a message on the end, a link. How are you doing that typically?
If your content is successful in your sort of pre-production planning phase, you really need to say, okay, well, can we deliver several calls to action throughout the piece of content? So rather than just waiting to the end, I think these days, especially with content that's sort of a little bit longer, because we have seen the average length expand from sort of 2 minutes now with short-form content out to sort of 4 minutes. So there's nothing wrong with having a call to action sort of up front, and whether you do that, with an annotation on YouTube, or whether you have a graphic, etc., where they can click through, I think that there's nothing wrong with doing that. Another thing that I see that hasn't been used enough, certainly with annotations on YouTube, is that you can create an interactive experience for something. So let's say at the start of the segment, I give a bit of an overview, and I give someone opportunity to branch off into different aspects. So let's say if it was a car and I wanted to go and look into the interior features, there might be a box or an annotation that comes off that allows me to wander off. So in a way, that's a call to action for me to go and resource further information. And I certainly, this is an amazing tool on YouTube that's actually not used enough. And Christopher, I'm sure you'd probably agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you go way back doing online. You had worked for the resort in Japan, and you were doing daily videos using a camera. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, I mean that is a fantastic case study because we a group of guys bought Australian guys bought a Japanese resort called Hanazano, which is one of 4 resorts in Niseko. Niseko is now regarded as a world top 10 resort to go to. It gets 17 meters annual snowfall, which is absolutely amazing. And we thought to ourselves, okay, here's Japan, which back then in early sort of 2003, 2004, is very foreign to people. It's changed these days because I think we helped create a soft landing, but we thought, what are the barriers? The barriers are people think that Japan is a very foreign country. It might all be in Japanese. And so we looked at all the barriers and we thought, well, the way that we can get around that is by producing video content, and certainly on a daily basis, that would fit into different pillars of content. And one of those pillars of content was the Daily Snow Report. We were the first resort in the world to do that. And if you actually think about it, you've got a presenter there, you've got beautiful overlay footage of great powder snow shot the day before, and there they are, and it's snowing. And this happens for about 85% of the season, it's snowing. So it was a good way to represent how amazing these conditions were. And then for the soft landing, we did things like restaurant reviews, what's the etiquette you should have in an onsen, how do you get from the airport to the resort, and we just kept supporting that all of the time. And then what we found is that people really engaged with the content. When they got there, they actually knew the presenter, used to go up and say hi. They felt very familiar. We then took it to the next level because we said, how do we syndicate this content? How do we get this content out there? So we used every available platform, video platform, Vimeo, all of them that we could. We also found out in different countries where were people going to view and engage with video content. And to give you an example, with Northern Europe, with Sweden, etc., there was a group of skiers and snowboarders. They had specific sites that they used to go to view video content, so we started posting our content on there. We also made sure that it was done on a regular basis, and today Niseko sees around 15,000 tourists coming from those countries. So what started with just video content has spiraled into visitation that is worth millions and millions of dollars in today's terms.
Now, what type of venues these days are you using? You're saying you're going specifically to the skiing sites. Today for clients, what are some of maybe the lesser heard of video distribution or syndication channels that you're using?
Well, look, we used to syndicate everywhere. And like, for instance, if you're doing a bike segment, you go to Pin Bike. So you try to find these different these different platforms that are aligned to people's specific lifestyle, etc. So we hunt around for those sorts of things. But to be honest, I'm a big fan of YouTube. I love YouTube. I just think it offers, from a functional and perspective, creative perspective, it certainly offers a lot. The other thing I think these days, which we've moved into in a big way, is programmatic buying for video inventory. And my feeling is that, if you really want to get some viewership and some engagement behind your content, these days you need to put some paid behind it. So, we encourage our clients that maybe are just sort of moving into this area to say, use YouTube TrueView. We'll set up the campaign, manage it for you. And then if it's on a bigger scale, we use programmatic, which allows people to go in and buy those sort of forced 15 and 30-second views on channels like YouTube. The upside is you draw them in with those key pieces, and then you make sure that you support it with supporting content for your campaign or your brand, etc. So it's like a pathway. Let's lead them in, then let's support it with other content, and then support it with calls to action. Am I making sense there?
You're making total sense. From my experience from YouTube, it seems like I'm able to generate a lot of views on YouTube, but when I'm trying to get a viewer to engage for a longer period of time, I've actually had better luck with Vimeo. Do you find that same sort of situation, that YouTube is more somebody, you know, hunting and pecking, looking to see what's out there, and then once they look to really dive into something, they may steer themselves to a more specialized site?
Look, I think you're spot on then, and there's two things here. Is, you know, Vimeo definitely specialises in certain types of content. So, for instance, you know, sports, it's the perfect site. Whereas I think the second point is it comes back to the individual and how resourceful they are. So, you know, I think for a lot of people, the first port of call will be YouTube. It's a bit like, you know, going into Google and doing a search, and, you know, the older generation thinks that the web is Google. So, you know, you go in and you do a search and you find something, and I think it's the same with YouTube. You know, it's the world's third or second biggest search engine. So they go in and they find that content, and then, yeah, I think they tend to, from that point, go out and seek content elsewhere. So I think you're right. So it comes back to, you know, the individual and the sort of content that's displayed on Vimeo. Mind you, we've had a lot of success with sites that are very fishing specific, that are mountain bike specific, and they're out there, and, you know, they've got their own audience, and they're normally hardcore, and sometimes that's appropriate for you, for what your objective is, and sometimes it's not. But I think, yeah, you've got to have a kind of open mind, and you've got to be able to look at all of the platforms. And one thing that I find works really well today is Instagram with the 15-second video segments. You know, I find that the results are good, and if you look at the actual engagement of that content on a platform like that, even versus Facebook, you find you get a lot more interaction and likes and comments with your Instagram 15-second than you do with you know, with Facebook.
Well, Nigel, as we wrap up here, I was going to ask you, what are you working on these days?
Oh, look, currently we're working on very much a content-led campaign for Snow Victoria, and Snow Victoria represents the collective 7 resorts in Victoria, a state of Australia, and those 7 resorts all have a different USP, but what we do is we wrap them all together, and we have specific communication and messaging around that. So we're very much focused on video because we feel that it tells a better story. And if you look at our audience, our mandate is to grow the pie through the first-time market and also through the lapse market. So we feel we're able to tell a better story through video. So we have a lot of good video content that is obviously help populating the site. We have it on YouTube, etc. So we then support all of that by using programmatic buying. So we go out and we use a programmatic platform to distribute to all the publishers' sites with a click-through back to the site, which then supports them with other content. And you think about a first-timer, you know, going to the snow seems quite overwhelming. So once again, we need to overcome all of those hurdles for them, and I think a very successful way of doing that is through video content. That's something that we're working on. The campaign is actually in action at the moment. You can go to snowvictoria.com to have a look at the types of things we're doing. But we've been using content as a lead, and especially with video as a lead, you know, now for about the last 3 or 4 years.
So how can people get a hold of you?
They can contact me, Nigel, at ripplingmedia.com, or just, you know, type in Rippling Media in Google, and up will come the site, and they can contact me that way.
That wraps it up for this episode of Mediaographer Online. A big thank you to Nigel for joining us, and we'll see you next time.